Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. It's always good if your neighbors look out for you and care. Surprisingly, we start our video with a story about good neighbors. We'll continue right after a short pause. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. The owner said I could sleep here. This happened to my grandmother about 10 years ago, and she's the owner in this story. Our family farms an 80-acre section of land butted right up next to a small Midwestern town. It was planting time, and my grandmother would often come out to help my dad move machinery around while I was busy in school. Just like any other day, Grandma drove out and helped move machinery, as usual, and my dad started the slow process of planting the field with a 6-row planter. Grandma had nothing else to do at this point, so she proceeded to roll down the car windows and read her book on a beautiful spring morning. After a little while, she dozed off. An indeterminate amount of time later, she woke up to a persistent tapping on the windowsill. It was a police officer, and he proceeded to ask her if she had permission to be on this property. She said, "I hope so, I own the place." One of the neighbors called in a suspicious vehicle that had been sitting on the property for a long time, and the police came to check things out. My grandmother thanked the officer for taking the time to investigate because we have had machinery vandalized in the past and have had other things stolen if left there overnight. All in all, it was a humorous misunderstanding that let us know our neighbors try to help watch out for us. And our second story. Let's do it your way. Seattle, 1990s. I worked for a guy that ran his business out of his pocket and his personal checking account. We were transportation and handled lots of cash, checks, and credit cards. Pay was per hour, with tips paid out of those checks and CCs. So end of the month, we settled up, and most times we got cash for our pay. Things changed one month, and he paid us with a personal check. Not an issue, he's got bucks, just not cash this time. So no worries, I headed over to his bank to cash the check, stood in line, handed the check and ID to the teller. She smiled and said I would either have to deposit the check to my account or open an account with them. I explained that I have no wish to open an account and have no personal account due to recent departure of wife number 2, so I needed it in cash. She declined again, so I asked her, just for clarification, to confirm that funds were available to cover the check. It was simply bank policy that prevented it being cashed. She smiled and said yes. I smiled and asked for a manager. Her smile dimmed, and she said that the manager couldn't change policy. I explained that I wasn't asking them to change policy. I was calling the police, and I needed a branch banking officer to assist the officer in filing charges. She said, "This isn't a crime." I said, "I'm not charging the bank. I'm charging your customer that gave me a check that you won't honor. That's fraud." She ran off to get help. I called my boss and told him what was happening and that I was charging him with fraud. He laughed and said to keep him posted. Teller returns with a dude in a white shirt. Explain to him, yada yada yada, he restates bank policy. I tell him that I don't bank with them. Their policy cannot be forced on me, and I will summon the police and the press, and he can explain to his corporate why they're making bad press headlines. Him. How would you like your cash? Me. Immediately. Beautiful. It's funny how mentioning both the police and mass media usually changes a business's policy. And our next story. Story in which a difficult client who is friends with the owner finally gets what's coming to him. Everybody knows a Grinch, a Scrooge, a C. Montgomery Burns, somebody who, for whatever reason, makes it their mission to ruin the happiness of others. In normal, everyday life, we can ignore the Scrooges, or if they're particularly horrible, just punch them in the face and be done with it. But when you have a Scrooge for a customer, you can unfortunately neither punch nor ignore him. Such is the case with my store's Mr. Green, name edited to protect the a-hole-ish. Mr. Green is on the winding down side of a midlife crisis. His anatomy has reasserted itself and is slowly but steadily pushing the hair plugs out of his head. He seems to have developed a tolerance for diet pills because his spare tire is returned with a vengeance. The credit cards he was issued to finance his new childhood are coming up declined more and more, and his 2008 Mustang convertible has ancient bird crap stains on the leather from the numerous times he's parked it without putting the top back on. Were it not for his pugnacity, Mr. Green would be a pitiable fellow. Mr. Green comes to our clothing shop at least 3 times a week, always following the same routine. On Monday, he will come in and purchase a lot of clothing. On Tuesday, we'll get a call from Mr. Green informing us that he's dissatisfied with the clothing. On Wednesday, he'll come back to the store to return the items he's dissatisfied with. On Thursday, we'll get another call in which he insists that one of his many soon-to-be-defunct credit cards was not credited back the proper amount. He gives us a day off on Friday, though we don't know why. On Saturday, he'll come back in to argue and haggle with our manager to try to get more money than he's owed. Week in, week out, this is how it goes with Mr. Green. Unto itself, this would not be reason enough to hate the man. A customer may be very difficult, even demanding, but that alone doesn't make him an a-hole. Being an a-hole about it is what makes him an a-hole. He has on numerous occasions insulted our staff, even using the N-word on one of our cashiers when the total of his purchase exceeded his original estimate. He parks in handicapped spaces plural. He'll drive his gross Mustang in, facing the store laterally. Whenever he's confronted about it, he shrugs, saying, "The sooner I'm done here, the sooner the spaces will be free again. Chop, chop." He's been asked to leave several times after sexually harassing female customers, each time vowing to sue if he was mishandled. And he would always get away with all of it because the owner was his best high school buddy. That is, until recently. Last week, our owner sold out his franchise to the corporate company from which he had purchased the license. We, the employees, had feared this meant that the store would simply close and we'd be out of jobs. But mercifully, Teenage Hipster Clothing Store Incorporated decided to keep our location open. They promoted one of our floor managers, Tony, who'd been called the N-word by Mr. Green, to the position of general manager, and our hourly wage was raised by 25 cents. Suffice to say, we're all ready to give a salute to our corporate overlords. But the best was yet to come. The night before his first shift as general manager, a Friday, and obviously after his promotion had been announced to the rest of us employees, one of the guys asked Tony what he planned to do about Mr. Green. Tony, already the model of corporate type, said only, "Just do your jobs like you already do, and don't worry about it." The next day, Saturday, Mr. Green showed up, just like always, to try and eke more money than he was owed out of us. He parked across the 2 closest handicap spaces, just like always. He marched into the store and asked to be shown to the men's section, even though he knew where it was by heart. But before anyone could even approach, Tony was already there. Tony had positioned himself between Mr. Green and the rest of the store proper on the tile foyer directly in front of the automatic sliding doors. Tony had an object in his hand which I didn't immediately recognize. I feared momentarily that it might have been a weapon. I couldn't hear what Tony said to Mr. Green, but the voice with which he said it was low and menacing. My fears grew. Is Tony about to shoot Mr. Green? Mr. Green's eyes grew wide as Tony spoke. At first I attributed this to being threatened with bodily harm. But I watched the expression grow from one of surprise to indignation. "What the F are you talking about?" Mr. Green screeched. "I want to see former owner's name, right now." More rumbled conversation from Tony, who'd begun to draw himself up to his full height of 6'3". "F you," Mr. Green roared. "I've been coming here for years. You can't just throw me out. I haven't even done anything." At which point, Tony produced the item. He held it in front of his own face, and I finally recognized a Polaroid camera. It flashed as Tony held it steady, momentarily confusing Mr. Green, who then launched into a full-on conniption. Tony walked away from Mr. Green. As he passed by me toward the offices in the back of the store, he growled, "Don't let him have crap, and make sure he doesn't steal anything." Not far behind, jogging and all the while cursing a blue streak, was Mr. Green, demanding that picture Tony had taken was his property and that he had no right, etc., etc. When he got to me, I politely interspersed myself between him and the entrance to the office, explaining, "I'm sorry, Mr. Green, employees only." "Bullcrap," he declared, trying to walk around me. I quickly backed up, putting myself directly in front of the doorway to the offices. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Green, but you can't go back there." He looked about ready to body check me at this point, so I shrugged and moved out of the way. Mr. Green gave me a filthy look as he moved and tried to open the door, which was locked. Mr. Green began to pound on the door, making threats legal, bodily, and metaphysical. He went on like this for about a solid minute before Tony opened the door and stepped out. Mr. Green steeled himself as Tony returned, ready for a fight, but Tony sidestepped him and walked straight to me. He handed me a stack of papers. Each was a flyer which bore the words persona non grata above the photograph of Mr. Green in mid-tirade. Put these on all of the entrances and behind every cashier station, Tony said, speaking loudly, his voice an andante bass of angry determination. Mr. Green had leaned over to see what it was that Tony had handed me and started anew his protestations. Tony paid him no mind and brushed past him back into the office. Mr. Green continued his howling and pounding on the door, looking like the big bad wolf, if the big bad wolf had let himself go and tried to cover it up with hipster clothing. He spied me turning to walk to the entrance and came towards me saying, "If you put those up, I will sue you for defamation of character and discrimination." I was unsure of what to do because I don't want to get sued, even if it's pretty unlikely, but relishing the idea of humiliating Mr. Green, I was saved from hesitation by an announcement over the store's PA. It was Tony's voice calmly announcing, "To the driver of the yellow Mustang convertible, your car is being towed." There was a moment of silence as both Mr. Green and I came to understand what that meant. And quicker than I've ever seen him move, Mr. Green skittered down the aisle towards the entrance. I followed and looked out the large glass doors at the entrance to our store to see Mr. Green hemming and hawing at the tow truck operator who'd already begun to load his car into the bed of his truck. When I turned around, there was Tony, with a grin a mile wide on his face, the same grin which blossomed on my own face. We haven't seen Mr. Green at all this week, and I'm starting to think that we never will again. My only wish is that when he left, you shouted, "Merry Christmas, you filthy animal!" Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.